We're calling to order the City of Oxnard Planning Commission regular meeting for Thursday, January 16, 2020. May we have roll call, please?
Chair Frank.
Here.
Vice Chair Chua.
Here.
Commissioner Chavez.
Here.
Commissioner Meyer. Here. Commissioner Sanchez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, and we'll welcome back Commissioner Sanchez. He can lead the pledge.
Please place your hand over your heart and sing along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Moving to public comments. This is an opportunity for a member of the public to address the Planning Commission on items that are not on our agenda. I have no speaker cards, but this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to say anything, now is the time to come forward and submit a speaker card, or just speak and later submit a speaker card. I don't see anybody. I'll close public comment. We'll move to the consent agenda. We have no items on our consent agenda. We'll move to item E1, continued public hearing. This is planning and zoning permit number 17-300-9. Our planner is Paul McLaren. Mr. McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. So this is a continued hearing for the Rusi parcel map waiver, PZ 17-300-09. The project description, again, is to request to subdivide a 4.19 acre site, commonly known as the swap meet, into two parcels. Parcel A is going to be a 3.14 acre lot and has been designed to retain a 16,600 square foot commercial building and associated parking. Parcel B would be an undeveloped 1.05 acre lot. No development is proposed on either lot at this time. This was filed by David Kesterson of Lauterbach and Associates. This is the existing site. It is 3501 South Saviors Road. Again, it has a existing multi-tenant commercial building on the property, occupied by various tenants. There is a Ralph's grocery store to the north. East of this, across Saviors, are restaurants, retail, laundromats, and a used car center. To the south is single family, which is off to the southwest, kind of further back. You can't really see it. It'd be back in the far left corner in this picture. And then directly to the south of this, there are additional commercial spaces on Saviors Road. And then to the west, immediately west behind the building, are multi-unit apartments and single-family residences. The property is zoned, or has a general plan land use of commercial general. And it has a zoning of C2 on a portion of it and CPD on a 62-foot strip at the west side of the property. This is a little bit of background that I didn't have last time that I'd like to fill you in on. Is in this particular case, this was what the property was subdivided as back in 1960. The green square is the parcel to be subdivided, and at that time then they built Hughes Market on there and Vitro Labs on that property. So in 1959 the subject property was zoned C2 except for the westerly 62 feet of it along A Street, which was zoned R3. And again, the C2 lot was occupied by Hughes Market and Vitro Labs. The City Council had granted a variance in this 62-foot zone to allow parking on that R3 section. In 1964, the Planning Commission of the City of Oxnard initiated a zone change that would affect that parcel, zone change case 266, and Planning Commission Resolution of Intention number 1488. And they stated that the reason they were initiating this was for inadequate zoning pattern. The Planning Commission hearing was on April 1964. The planning manager and secretary stated that the variance was not a proper use of the variance and that a commercial parking area should have the benefit of a C zone. PD was fairly new at the time and it hadn't existed prior to this, so the CPD was just kind of standard zoning that was applied. So the CPD was applied to that portion of this lot. City Council Ordinance 888 became effective July 16th, 1964, and was the final step to change the zoning for the lot. And so that is the ordinance right now that changed the zoning, and this is the zoning that still exists today. This was passed by the council. So eventually Hughes Market and Vitro Labs went out of business. Then in October of 1998, there was an indoor swap meet approved at the old Hughes Market. A structure fire damaged that building in 2005. In 2008, a demo permit was issued for that building, leaving just the previously Vitro Labs 16,600 square foot multi-tenant commercial building. So this is the site plan that was provided by the applicant. So again, this is showing the entire site, 4.19 acre site. This is the parcel that they are proposing to take out, 1.05 acres, leaving the remainder of the property. This portion back here is actually about 3/4 of an acre, just a little bit more. The red here are existing access easements to the property. Both shared access easement agreements with Ralph's to the north, an access easement agreement so that this restaurant can access parking along here, and all of these, as conditions of approval, have been preserved. So then this is the actual tentative map, just to show you what the actual tentative map, the parcel map they've submitted looks like. Again, it shows the this is the line for the 62-foot separation and zoning, so everything to the west of this solid, thick dotted line is CPD, and everything else, to include the entire parcel that's being separated out, is C2. So then on December 16th, 2019, we held a community workshop for this project as directed by Planning Commission. The notice was mailed on December 6th to all property owners within 2,000 feet of the property lines. It was also mailed to residents who had called in and requested to be added to an interested parties list. The workshop was advertised in the La Vida newspaper on December 5th, 2019. The workshop time and date was also posted at the site, and the sign was placed on December 6th of 2019. 8 residents attended the workshop for this project, including the property owner. Staff presented the project background information about subdivisions and development processes. No attendees actually objected to the subdivision. Their concerns were primarily addressed to Mr. Rusi, and they said that they would love to have their voices and wanted to ensure that they had their voices heard on future project proposals for the property, as well as for all of South Oxnard. They're concerned about the quality of development that will occur on these lots. They would like for the development to be something that's going to help revitalize South Oxnard and draw people to South Oxnard to inspire other developers to invest in their community. And the community is concerned about the housing shortage and would like to see the property developed with a mix of commercial and affordable housing. There are 37 conditions of approval for this project. Most of them are standard, but the following are some of the less standard conditions. Again, what we're trying to do here is, since this property is a little under-maintained, we're trying to make sure that as a condition of this, that the property be approved, and that they are going to be requiring that parcel A get lighting, and parcel B, when it is developed, get lighting. Requirements on parcel A to include 67 newly striped spaces, including their ADA compliant spaces, one being van accessible, creating their motorcycle parking that's required, creating their loading zones that are required, delineating the ADA compliant paths both from A Street and from Saviors, installation of ADA compliant ramps on the curb up to the actual store frontage, installation of 2 long-term bicycle parking spaces and 8 short-term bicycle parking spaces in line with the bicycle pedestrian master plan. It requires that existing access and parking easements remain in full force, requires proof of the recordation of a new access and parking agreement for the new parcels, requires that the installation of a trash enclosure be designed and built per city standards to serve the existing commercial building on parcel A. At the last moment, the conditions were modified for consistency and clarity. We've given you a copy of that in your packet. Conditions 14 and 17 did not include timing as to when the CC&Rs would be completed or the trash enclosures constructed, so that timing has been added. It's the copy you have is striking out any text that has been changed or deleted and adding in new text. And then conditions 7, 11, 27, 31, and 32, the language was modified to be consistent with a certificate of approval, which is how this project will be finalized as to the subdivision. So again, you have those packets. You can see where each one of those conditions was changed in your packet. This project is exempt for environmental review in accordance with Section 15315, minor land divisions, Class 15, because it's 4 or fewer parcels. Notice of exemption will be filed, and staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission approve Planning and Zoning Permit number 17130-09 for a parcel map waiver, subject to certain findings and the modified conditions in the resolution.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any question of our planner? Questions of our planner? No? Oh, Commissioner Sanchez.
Mr. McLaren, thank you very much for your report and presentation. Just had a question. So as far as the location of that building, it's closer to the front. I can sort of see the reason for that because of the visibility. Were there any significant changes from the last time it came before us?
No, there have been no changes other than the resolution being modified slightly, and we've held the community workshop.
Okay. Well, I thought it was okay the last time, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? I don't see anyone else. Okay, does the applicant, Mr. Rusi, is there anything you would like to add? Mr. Rusi? Thank you for coming this evening.
Ralph Rusi, 2130 Greencastle Way, Oxnard.
Thank you. Is there anything you'd like us to know?
Well, I don't understand, but I thought that after a year and several months, those conditions were fairly well established. But what I did, I came down here to see what you folks are going to do
Okay.
with my application. And apparently, I see 3 choices, 3 possibilities. One, you'll approve it as it came to you. One, you'll approve it with the conditions demanded by the chairman. Or 3, you'll deny the application. And Mr. McLaren can let me know how it turns out. Thank you very much.
Just a moment. Sir? Yeah? Just a moment. I just want to make sure that none of the commissioners have any questions for you.
Oh, no
Commissioners? Commissioner Chavez.
Mr. Rusi, thank you for coming back again tonight. Question, our last time that you came before this commission, our vice chair asked you to change the division of the parcel. According to staff's report, there was no change to the division.
That's correct.
Can you explain why?
Well, this is a standard lot split in the city of Oxnard. Most, if not all, of the shopping centers in Oxnard have had this type of a lot split in the past. For instance, the Center Point Mall, a little over 30 acres, has 18 parcels. Now, if you don't like them, I don't know what you can do about it. Mine's just a standard lot split, just like all the others.
I appreciate that, Mr.
And
Rusi.
I don't understand why someone would want that changed.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you why, because based off of many of the comments that were spoken up here that night, we were concerned by the way that it was being cut up. And that's why we were asking you to look back at it again as trying to cut it up a different way versus what it is right now. Very
That's the part I don't understand.
well.
It's done that way all over town. There's nothing significantly different from it, with it from others.
Okay, so
You can look around. I suggest that you familiarize yourself with the city of Oxnard. I've been around a long time, lots longer than anybody on this commission.
And I appreciate that. And I
So-
was born and raised in this city, so this is a city that I'm very familiarized with. So thank you for telling me
I was born
about
and
that.
raised here.
But I'm going to
my
go ahead and
parents
continue,
my
Mr.
grandparents.
Excuse me, can we have a little order? Let's have one person speak at a time here. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and continue and ask, during the community workshop, our planner made comment that residents had voiced some concerns. Can you share what those concerns were?
I think that should be the planner's job. I don't remember any concerns about the lot split whatsoever.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Thank you very much. Put on the other glasses. Okay. This is I'm sorry.
No problem. Just as a matter of housekeeping, ex parte communications.
Any ex partes? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing. I don't have any speaker cards on this item. Does anybody have any commentary, questions, concerns on this item that they wish to present? I don't see anything. I'll close the public hearing on E1 and turn it over to my commissioners. Gentlemen, anybody? Any discussion? Sanchez? Nothing? Okay. What are you?
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you have questions?
I'm asking now.
Shortcut the discussion. Yes, Chair. Commissioner Chavez was reminding me of some of the discussion, but I don't feel like I'm fully remembering, and perhaps our planning department could help refresh my memory about the concerns around how it was split. I remember there's concerns about where the easements were and how that might cause challenges with possible future developments.
If I may, I think the major concern back then was, is if the lot will have enough room to for development, because as probably you know by now, I don't like waivers. So, I mean, my main concern at the time was that if this was developed and then the property owner turns around and says, oh, by the way, the lot is too small, I want some waivers. I just don't want to support any waivers on a particular property that we approved for a land division that could have been subdivided bigger to provide more room. So that's all my concern. So I would like, if we have to support this, I would like to request that no waivers be given on the property, knowing that, the property owner didn't want to rethink the subdivision. And I don't know how that's going to be, remembered in the future. You see what I'm saying?
I understand. I remember what we talked about.
Right. So that's my only concern. I can support this, provided that it's reminded, or the future staff would be reminded that, we're not going to tolerate any waivers on this property because we gave the applicant a chance to make that change. And if he doesn't do it, I respect that, because as a property owner, I respect his property rights. But in protecting the city, I would like to be able to have something something to remind the future staff and future commissioners that this was done, that what happened tonight.
And I agree with that, and I will also add that just because something was always done doesn't mean that it was right. And this is our opportunity as commissioners to change the way that we develop in our city. I can respect his comments, but I agree with you 100%, Vice Chair Chua.
Madam Chair, I think if that's the pleasure of the commission, you could, if you were inclined, vote to approve the subdivision before you and express your opinion that future projects to develop on this site, that you wouldn't support. Obviously, it's not binding, but you could express a strong opinion that if this size of site creates the pressure for some sort of variances or waivers, that's not something the commission would be inclined to support. So we have a record of that to
Exactly.
provide to, that you could do that. It wouldn't be in your direct action, but it would certainly be something we could reflect in the minutes. So the minutes from tonight would have the action, but you would also express your concerns about future waivers.
As long as the minutes, because the minutes are getting sparser and sparser, which I'm not a big fan of, because it doesn't look as though there was any significant or substantive discussion about the issues. So, you know, when we're crafting minutes, whoever is taking the minutes, I think this discussion needs to be included, that there was concern among the commissioners about the future project development on this subdivided lot, and I don't think it's limited to this particular subdivided lot, but the surrounding parcel as well, because the remnant parcel that's left after this subdivision, that L shape, is the same type of project that Pleasant Valley had in trying to find a developer to fit in a project around the Amar Ranch Market. And there were all kinds of contortions with that. So, because there's the Amar Ranch Market, and then there's the L development around it. Yeah. So
We can definitely make sure the record is clear. Scott, I think, has some specific language that you could include that would be, we would have in
Okay.
the minutes for your review and approval.
okay, go ahead.
So as one comprehensive motion, it would be the approve as submitted with the modified conditions as suggested by staff. With the additional language, the planning commission also directed for future development.
Wait, slow down
Sorry.
and speak in the microphone better.
The planning commission also directed for future development on both parcels to be compliant with all zoning standards.
Without variation?
That any deviation to standards shall not be supported by, is not supported, will not be supported. Something to that effect.
Well, we can't say won't, but
Madam,
Won't, but may not be,
let the lawyers figure it out.
yeah. Let's let
Say,
Ken do it.
instead of won't, just say would not be supported. That's not.
Mandatory.
Would not create the issues. If you
Right.
say
Right.
would not be
Would,
supported.
yeah,
Right.
let's
Or
use,
they would not support. The planning commission would not support.
let's use the word would. Thank you.
I think that'll work. Okay, so you're making a motion, Commissioner Sanchez?
Are we done with discussion?
I think so.
Okay, then I would like to make a motion to approve Ruzi tentative parcel map, planning and zoning permit number 17-300-09 with the suggested language that you mentioned.
By staff, yeah.
Yeah.
Can we
With
also
the
put-
modified conditions in the resolution as presented by staff and the additional language concerning future development, future project. Okay, we have a motion.
Second,
We have a motion by Sanchez, second by Chua. Roll call.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes?
Vice Chair Chua,
yes.
Commissioner Sanchez, or
Chavez.
sorry, Chavez.
no, and I want the record to reflect that I'm voting no on this because I don't support the fact that it's being cut up the way that it is, and I don't believe that the language is strong enough.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Chair Frank.
Yes. Thank you. Motion, sorry, that's not my job, that's your job.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving to F1. This is Planning and Zoning Permit Number 19-510-03, special use permit. Our planner is Juan Martinez.
Before you is Planning and Zoning Permit 19-510-03. This is a special use permit for an alcohol. It's filed by Karina's Royal Banquet Hall and Karina's Restaurant Hall and Grill, which is one business operator, Sylvia Ochoa, under 2 DBAs at the location at 529 South A Street. Most of us know it as The Kitchen. Again, the request is for on-site sale of general alcohol, which includes spirits. ABC classifies it as, ABC is the Alcohol Beverage Control. State license classifies this as on-sale general for a bona fide eating restaurant facility. It's further classified as a type 47, and this would be to establish the use at an existing 2,500 square foot restaurant banquet facility. This would be during the proposed alcohol service. The alcohol would be restricted for the service hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., and then this would not have outdoor sales or service for alcohol outside of the restaurant. The building was constructed back in 1980. There is a former special use permit that was granted by the Planning Commission dating back to November 20th, 2003. The use permit number is 03-52009. That use permit authorized the premise to operate as a banquet facility with dancing. In addition, or in relationship to that use permit, the event holders were permitted to apply for a private party one-night dance permit with the city and also seek a state license permit to serve alcohol on the premise on a day-by-day basis again, it was for the event holders. The use permit did not authorize the premise or the business operator to hold a license for an ongoing continued sales of alcohol. Building permits related to the 2003 were issued in 2006 to remodel the restaurant and banquet facility. In August of 2010, the kitchen did obtain an ABC license, and this was an ABC license for a Type 41 for on-site sales of beer and wine. Since then, the kitchen restaurant license has expired since they closed back in 2016. This is just a vicinity map. It is within the newly designated downtown core, which is coded as DT-C. This is a downtown. Staff reviewed the proposed request, and it's found consistent with the 2030 and the zoning maps. The zoning designation, again, is downtown core, and the 2030 general plan designation designates our downtown area as downtown. Directly to the north of the restaurant, there's a public Paseo, which connects people from the street, A Street, to the back alley and parking lot, public parking lot. East and across A Street, there's general retail store. Directly south, there's more retail, general. And then west is the public parking lot in the alley. This is a front view and a side view of the Paseo that connects people from A Street to the back parking lot. The entrance into this restaurant is approximately near the center of the facade that faces A Street. There's 2 tenant spaces on both sides. The first 2 arches that are side by side are the 2 entrances, one leading into the restaurant area, and then the other archway has a doorway that leads into the banquet facility. Again, this is a building that was built back in the 1980, so it's a fairly new building in downtown. This is just a simple back view of how it aligns with the alley and the Paseo. The image to the right shows the premise, the banquet facility on the right, connecting with the entrance on A Street, and then to the left of that is the restaurant, which again connects with the Paseo. The total area of the restaurant is 6,500. The seating capacity for the restaurant is at 69 people. The banquet facility is approximately 117. The owners are proposing a 2-shift operation with approximately 5 employees, 7 days a week, with business hours Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to midnight, and then on Sunday from 8 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. This is a breakdown of the restaurant to the left and the banquet facility to the right. The shades in area show sort of the seating area, the dining areas. There is an existing bar to the left of that, shown in pink and noted as a bar. Directly south is the kitchen area, the prep area, dry storage, and other related needs for the restaurant, with some office areas and a pair of restrooms, 2 restroom facilities, one in each location. There was a police report prepared for this. This was in pursuant to City Council Resolution 11-11896. The report identified that there were 3 similar uses within 350 feet. Within 1,000 feet, there were 9 similar uses. The service calls do show that the crime rate is significantly higher at 230. When you compare this with the citywide commercial averages, the report identifies that these peak hours in service are partly because of the homeless population in downtown. However, the report also identifies that restaurants and similar uses are typically not policing issues in the city. This is particularly because the police department has standard conditions that are both for operating and for keeping restaurants in a bona fide real setting. Some of the police conditions that are identified in the draft resolution are responsible beverage service training for both servers and the business operators, restrictions for operations, and restrictions that would maintain the business as a bona fide restaurant. It includes conditions regarding surveillance and security. It also identifies key locations where the cameras would be and what type of systems they would have to install. It also includes information or requirements that extend the viewing of those conditions to the police department. The alcohol sales, again, there is a condition that restricts alcohol sales from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. The project or the application, we did have a community workshop where we reached out to the Hobson Park neighborhood. The meeting was held back in October 21st of 2019. Approximately 590 notices went out. However, only 13 persons attended the informational workshop where staff made a presentation. However, we didn't receive any comments or negative input. We also didn't get any phone calls from the public asking clarification questions or opposition or the project is exempt. We've identified that pursuant to Section 15301, this is an existing facility. Staff is intending to file a notice of exemption. The report does include a police report that was prepared by Scott Swenson with the Oxnard Police Department. He's the Neighborhood Safety and Alcohol Compliance Specialist. He's here tonight. Are any questions? I don't know if I missed anything or if he wishes to add anything to the report that was prepared and to our presentation here tonight. Staff does recommend that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution. This is special use permit number 19-51003. The resolution also includes repealing of the special use permit that was granted back in 2003. That use permit is identified as 03-52009, and this would be approving the resolution subject to the certain findings and conditions that are in your draft resolution. Again, that concludes our presentation, and Scott Swenson is here tonight to add to our staff presentation or answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions of our planner? Commissioner Chavez.
Thank you for the presentation. Question, the banquet hall and the restaurant area, it appears that they're both connected on slide 10. Is there an existing wall or this is already currently open between the two?
Chair Frank, Commissioner Chavez, there is an opening and there is a direct connection between the two. It's been there since 2006 when the building permits allowed these two to function as one.
Okay. That was all, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioners? Okay, I have some questions. I want to know how many restaurants there are in downtown that serve alcohol beyond 10 o'clock, that are restaurants, not stores, not liquor stores or mini marts or meat markets or any of that. So if someone could please advise me in that regard.
Actually, Madam Chairwoman, I did do a little bit of research this afternoon. I can't give you an absolute number because my calculation is based on the alcohol special use permits that exist downtown. It does not include the hours of operations for the variety of restaurants. So I was able to go through the special use permits that I had on my file, and I found that there were 6 restaurants that operated after 10 p.m.
That serve spirits?
That's, not all of them serve spirits.
Okay, so can someone explain to me why the hours are limited here to serving alcohol up to 10 o'clock?
I certainly can. In a number of staff discussions, we have recognized, the police department has, that we have a significant amount of nightclub activity that generates excessive calls for service. Part of that plays into the calculation of the high level of incidents in the downtown area, and we're disinclined to support additional uses that late because it is a drain on workforce. It also impacts the DUI issues, the later you serve alcohol.
So Los Veros serves alcohol past 10 o'clock?
Yes.
And,
Well,
and La Fonda del Rey, same thing?
I can't say absolutely they're open that late because I didn't check their hours of operation.
Okay.
I checked the special use permit restrictions.
Okay,
So
well,
they're all authorized to operate after 10 p.m.
okay. And are there nightclub type activities that take place in those? I'm trying to figure out where this nightclub stuff is happening.
Okay.
So tell me, please.
The 2 that are on my list that have alcohol special use permits that do operate after 10 p.m. are Casa Lopez and Ruby's.
Okay,
Okay. And there are other establishments that are downtown that are grandfathered that do not have alcohol special use permits.
yeah, well, Casa Lopez isn't even on our list here as being within 1,000 feet of this project location. The only one I'm seeing here then that's presenting a problem is Ruby's, which is across Oxnard Boulevard. And
Correct.
that-
And when I looked, I'm sorry,
It's all right, sorry.
when I looked, I covered the whole downtown area, not the 1,000-foot circle.
Okay. I
Within
don't
the 1,000-foot circle, Miramar is within that, and they have operated after 10 p.m. They are not permitted. They're a grandfathered site.
Okay, and do you have nightclub activity there?
Yes.
That requires police response?
Yes.
Okay, so where's Casa Lopez?
Casa Lopez is 325 South 8th Street,
I
and
kn-
it's
I know-
outside the,
Go ahead,
it's outside the 1,000-foot radius.
Okay, so you only included within the 1,000-foot. I'm looking at the police report as part of the
Right,
staff
and
report.
I'm referring to my notes when I covered downtown from the comments from this afternoon. So
Oh, okay,
excuse the difference in
Okay.
data sets.
okay, and maybe for Juan, what is, I know that Casa Lopez is very large, Ruby's is pretty large. How do they relate size-wise to, because I've been to the kitchen many times when it was open. It didn't seem to me to be as large as either of those. Can you give me a square footage comparison or something? In other words, why are we anticipating a nightclub use? We've got a condition in here in the resolution against that. So, you know, my concern is that people in Oxnard, after they go and do something, or they're driving back home from somewhere, may want to stop and have something to eat and a drink. And there's nothing there. Or walking distance from the movie theater. Or hopefully one day we'll have live theater. Or, you know, something to do in downtown. And so that's why I'm concerned why we would allow them to stay open until 12 but cut off their alcohol at 10. especially on Friday and Saturday. So that's why I was sort of digging into the details here.
And I understand your concern. As an example, one of the restaurants, and I'd rather not highlight it
Sure.
here specifically, but one of the restaurants that operates after 10 p.m. in downtown under a restaurant license, an APC type 47, is on the county's place of last drink report.
It's on a what?
Place of last drink report. It is a report that's generated by behavioral health of those establishments where people who've been arrested for DUI, that's where they got their last drink. And those are businesses cause us concern because they're generating DUIs. When we do the investigation on their operations, we have found that they slip into from being a restaurant as they're licensed to being a nightclub. This particular one that I'm providing an example only opens their doors Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights at 9 p.m. And they're under a Type 47 license, and they're generating DUIs. If we don't put some types of restrictions on these restaurant licenses to ensure that they're operating on as restaurants, and very few people go out for a meal at 10 p.m., although some do, they will morph into a nightclub.
After some of the meetings we've had here, I'd love to find a place I could go out for dinner close by.
And I understand where you're coming from. It's a matter of there is a very big temptation with the alcohol licenses to morph into a nightclub, and that we're trying to resist that from a law enforcement standpoint because the call generation rate and the general impact on a community.
Are you able to have those violating ABC licenses revoked?
Having them revoked through ABC
Yes.
is a pretty big challenge. It's easier to try to leverage them with our alcohol special use permits, and currently, the businesses that are on the place of last drink report are under alcohol audits where we're finding that they are operating by selling more alcohol than food, which is in violation of both the permit and ABC's guidelines. And we do all that we can do to ensure compliance. We're not trying to drive them out of business. We're trying to drive them into compliance. And it's a constant battle with these businesses that have morphed from being a restaurant, but gee whiz, they don't open till 9 o'clock.
Well, this report says they'll be open at 7 a.m. I mean, that the hours could vary according to the market
Could
rate.
vary, but once they end up getting permitted, they can flex those hours around, and that's why we put the early closure if they're operating as a restaurant.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions?
In a follow-up question, staff, is there a difference between operation of a nightclub and a restaurant here in the city? Do you have a definition of what is a nightclub and what is a restaurant?
I'm going to defer back to Scott Swenson to assist with that from the police perspective. I don't believe there's a specific definition within our municipal code itself about that, but the ABC license types definitely have some descriptors that are associated with the license types.
So as far as the violation of the ABC conditions on, why can't ABC do anything about it? Are we reporting them to the ABC?
We work toward compliance under the framework we have on the permit that city issues. I will tell you that ABC is significantly overworked because their office covers the tri-counties, and we may be the largest city, but they don't move after this kind of violation very quickly. And they rely on us to do enforcement work and compliance work, and that's the reason why I have a position here, is to work with the businesses to try to bring them into compliance, not to put them out of business.
Well, even in this police operating conditions, and the other ones that we've had, there's been a provision that the police chief or designee may immediately suspend operation of the uses approved by this permit pending a hearing on the revocation of this permit if the chief finds that there have been significant violations of the special use permit. So the ones that you're talking about that are creating a problem, I think you've advised us were grandfathered in.
Some, yes, some are permitted and some are grandfathered.
Okay, but there's only 3 total that are potential nightclub activity facilities in downtown. And of those 3, how many are permitted? It doesn't matter.
Two of them, I believe.
Two.
And the one that has shown up on the polled report, the place of last drink report, is a permitted site, and we've been working with the owner since the middle of the year.
Well, you have the authority to immediately suspend operation of the uses approved by their permit. So, okay, I understand. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay, so if the concern from the police department is these particular businesses, you know, the problem businesses are opening after 9 p.m., correct? So what if we probably need to speak to the property owner if they agree not to open later than a certain time to make sure that they're not operating as a nightclub?
Well, that's only one part of nightclub activity. And I need to speak in the larger framework of what happens citywide. There are a number of places that, yes, they operate under Type 41 or Type 47 ABC license that are defined as restaurants, and they have very little traffic up until you end up getting to 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Oh yeah, they're open for business, but when you start investigating their finances, you'll find that they're pretty close to 50-50 or over in the sense of selling more, and it is a challenge to keep up with that many locations, and we end up doing those in-depth investigations when they show up on the place of last drink report, or we have excessive high calls for services, or both.
Commissioner Sanchez.
Yes, good evening. So, are most of the restaurants that stay open till midnight, well, let me frame it a different way. So are most of the restaurants that are in downtown open till midnight? Like La Fonda and Laveros and several others that are in that area?
I don't know that they're open till midnight, but I believe several of those are open after 10. I don't know the exact closing hour for those restaurants, but there is significant restaurant and alcohol consumption activity going on in downtown after 10 o'clock, available to, you know, the public in our downtown area up until 2 o'clock in the morning.
Where?
There's several places. Okay, Miramar Restaurant would be the first one that comes to my mind. El Dorado. Those are 2 restaurant sites, and both of those are unconditioned. They're not permitted. They're grandfathered.
And how far away, I'm sorry, were you finished?
Just had one more.
Go ahead, sure.
Okay, so my concern, that's why I sort of bring it up, is you know, if all the other restaurants are allowed to open till midnight, and this one is can't, well, it's only until 10 p.m. Isn't it handicapping this business by, you know, having a close, you know, it sort of can't be competitive if they don't have the same hours as the other restaurants in the area?
I can see your point. I don't fully disagree with it, but I also want to say how many nightclub type restaurants do we want to handle in downtown? And I will tell you from personal experience, when I served in downtown as a uniformed police officer up until the end of 2007, we had a team of 1 supervisor and 6 officers working downtown. That number has dwindled to 1 senior officer and 1 other officer. So we're trying to fight this battle with how to maintain peace and good business in downtown, and it's pretty challenging when we have applicants that want to go later and later and have the potential, and I find that in my discussions with this applicant, seem like, very nice people. They want to run a good business, but when we establish one of these permits, it's not just for them, it's for whoever might take that business site over down the road, and they may want to turn it into a nightclub. We did make a provision, and we've been doing this on a number of our applications in the last couple years, where we provide them the opportunity to obtain up to six one-day permits to extend their hours. This would be for special events like Mother's Day or New Year's Eve or those kind of things, to allow late-night operations for special events, but it still deters the potential nightclub activity, week to week to week.
Just one more comment or concern. Most of the, if you don't allow them to be competitive to some extent, what you're going to get, as it is, where most people go is the collection. So downtown Oxnard has an issue getting people over there. Now during the day is not, and during dinner time is no big problem, but later on. So, if we make too many restrictions, you stand the possibility where people just won't go there. And if people don't go, these businesses start to die. And then what do you have? You have homeless and other issues. So it's a balancing act, I think. If we restrict everything where you close it early or you just don't allow it or what have you, this is where you start getting other issues. And there's already a homeless problem in that area. And probably what keeps it from getting even bigger is because people still go there to the movie theater and to the restaurants and what have you. So I don't know, I think I have a concern concerning that. If we get a little bit too strict, then it could kill that whole vibe that you have over there right now.
And I certainly agree with you. In fact, we've had some discussion in staff, both at the police department and in the planning department, about those hours and what to do about the balance between business needs and the hours and the issue with nightclubs. And I know that on the drawing boards, in planning our future projects, it's going to add more density population downtown. That activation will, number one, help reduce crime, as well as provide a client base to to go to those restaurants. Currently, we're kind of in this in-between gray zone where we have a fair number of restaurant businesses that get regular clientele and are able to stay in business, but it's not like they're thriving as much as they could. If we had more downtown residents, it would probably support that, irregardless of what happens at the collection. I think a lot of people would really like to be able to walk to dinner, walk to the theater, and walk someplace for an after theater drink. I fully see that, but currently with the way things are shaped, we at the police department are really concerned about adding more potential nightclubs citywide and specifically downtown.
Does anyone know what the square footage is of this space?
2,500 square feet
Okay.
for both spaces.
That's smaller than my house. You're talking about an eating facility and a bar area and a kitchen. So what's the capacity for the building?
117 plus 69 in the restaurant area.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Chavez.
I'm hearing all these comments in regards to the police, so I guess we're jumping into the police. I thought we were separating between the planner and the police. So, Mr. Swanson, I do have a few comments in regards for police. In staff report, page 4, 6C, the last paragraph, the last sentence says that there is a contract security services as provided by PSC Security and 2 officers specifically assigned to downtown, 2 in part to mitigate impacts of concentration of alcohol outlets. How long is the security services contract till?
I'm not privy to that. I can tell you I was involved with it when I was working as a uniformed officer. They work through those hours. If I can refer to a Sergeant Alpine, is that pretty much the same?
Contact the B coordinator, see if she can tell me.
Okay. I'm pretty sure they operate security forces downtown during the bar and 2 o'clock hour. That's what they worked, back when I was on the street. So.
Now, the staff report and also in 6C, it said that there are 3 similar uses within 350 feet. Are the same locations that are selling the spirits, all the alcohol, using it as a banquet, using it as a restaurant as well?
I believe the 3 sites that are within 350 feet are at the cinema, at the Downtown Plaza cinema site.
Yeah.
Fresh and Fabulous, Laveros, and La Fonda are within that 350 feet range. And Fresh and Fabulous is not open in the evening, but I believe the other 2 businesses are, and they do have, they are permitted to operate after 10 p.m.
And are they Laveros and La Fonda, are they operating as a banquet / restaurant or only a restaurant?
They're operating as restaurants. I believe, if memory serves me correctly, the La Fonda has a dance permit, so there's dancing going on there. I do not believe Laveros is.
Okay. I only ask that just because when I see 3 similar uses, I expect them to be exactly the same, using that they have a banquet hall, the type of alcohol permit, and as the restaurant.
Well, let's clarify. I think it's the use being the alcohol permit use, not the use of the space.
That's pretty
am I
accurate.
right? Thank you.
May I, Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Chua.
So, I would like to ask staff.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I apologize.
I was still in the middle of my questioning.
Oh, I couldn't tell.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Swanson, you said that the alcohol permit is only going to go to 10 p.m., and we see through the staff report that they having Friday and Saturday till 12 a.m. You've had discussions with the applicant, correct?
Yes, I have.
And the applicant has expressed that they are okay with going to 10 p.m., or have they expressed other?
They were okay with the 10 p.m.
They were okay with that. Did they express that they wanted to go longer than 10 p.m., or were they okay with just stopping at 10 p.m.?
They didn't object, and Juan's kind of refreshing my memory, but we also mentioned the option for having 6 occasions during the year that they could go later, and I think that was kind of a bridge to solving that issue, and it addresses our issue of making sure the site does not turn into a nightclub, but gives them the opportunity to have special events several times a year.
Now, within the downtown area, how many businesses, the whole downtown area, you may or may not know this, but how many businesses do operate as a nightclub pretty much after hours?
Up until recently, it was 4. I believe it's now down to 3.
Okay.
And one of those does not operate all the time, if I remember correctly. I'm not downtown every weekend night, so I can't speak directly to it. But I would say our current operating level is probably 3 that are specifically downtown restaurant licenses that have morphed into nightclubs.
Now, according to staff's report, this area was 230% higher than the average citywide. How does this area get 230% and PD still says that it's okay to operate with the alcohol license, or special use permit, sorry?
And the 230% is the average of business or commercial properties in the city, not the city as a whole. It's commercial properties, kind of comparing like pieces. The reason why is the conditions.
Okay. Now I'm done, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry? I didn't, oh, he's done. Okay, Commissioner, Vice Chair Chua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me ask staff real quick. Ms. Mallory is here. Maybe she could answer. For the past 4 years that I've been here, 3 years, we've passed enough alcohol licenses. We've approved quite a few alcohol licenses. How many of those have become a problem? How many of those have we heard of where we granted a special use permit and they violated those conditions?
Or the police have actually.
Or any police service calls?
Okay. Over the last 4 years of permits you've granted, I would say I can't think of one offhand, but I will tell you right now I'm working a case on a permit that was granted 5 years ago, and they are on the place of last drink report from 2018, and they are operating upside down, meaning selling more alcohol than food.
So why don't you suspend their?
We're in the process. It's an enforcement action.
Okay, because that's the enforcement in violation of the resolution.
Right.
Okay.
So, okay, as far as, why don't we have that problem at the collection? Do we? At the collection, my kids, I know, goes out there for drinking past 10 o'clock. And is that a problem out there?
At 1 or 2 sites, yes. And we are working on it, and it's an enforcement action, so I can't say more specifics about it. But as much as the collection is pretty well maintained,
yes, it is.
There are a couple specific businesses that we are trying to move into compliance.
There's always a problem somewhere.
Okay, so because, Madam Chair, my opinion is,
Well, we're not, don't have.
oh, I'm sorry, no opinions, questions. So, staff, question for staff, what did the applicant originally apply for? What were the operating times?
Commissioner Shua, actually, the conditions are in line with their operational request. The staff report captures the timelines that are listed in their applications.
So they requested only after 10 p.m.?
The alcohol conditions are specific to the timeframes in the police condition, but the timeframe, I think I read 3 series of times which are in line exactly with the questionnaire that we put out there for them to fill out. So I took that timeframe from the application, and then police department includes the condition for alcohol between 7 and 10.
But the applicant, what did the applicant state what time? Did they say 7 to 11 or 7 till 10?
The police condition that speaks to alcohol was only something that I read the conditions to Ms. Ochoa. She didn't oppose to it because it was in line with her operating hours, and she understood that that sometimes these conditions apply because people have to sober up before they close. It may be a question that she may want to answer herself, and I'm here to translate. She is Spanish speaking, by the way.
I'll ask the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other do you have questions of the officer? Sure.
Good evening, sir. For my better edification, how does how we manage and how we restrict hours in relation to alcohol consumption there compared to the collection, and maybe if you're familiar outside of our city, I'm thinking of the other places where folks who enjoy late night activities might go, I think, downtown Ventura, and then I think they might want to go further into, say, Santa Barbara, for example. Do you have a sense of how they handle things, if it's working or not working, and is there anything that we do based on what's working and not working elsewhere? And
kind of a general overview, I will tell you that the city of Ventura has a similar alcohol special use permit process, and I believe their process started a little bit later than Oxnard's. Oxnard started, I believe, in 2000, and they are going through the same thing. They've got facilities that are grandfathered, and then those that are permitted. I will tell you that from looking at the place of last drink report for the last several years, although Oxnard is, I want to say, probably close to 2 times the size of Ventura, we tend to have fewer businesses show up on that list, and I think it's because we've had this process in place, and we have been heavily conditioning and supervising those permittees to ensure compliance, and if they fall out of compliance, we do all that we can do to drive them toward compliance so that they can be a profitable business and we don't generate DUIs.
Big push for people not driving.
Not driving.
At all, period. Right. 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 Ride sharing. Right. Right. Which is going to come into play in the future, especially as the demographics change. I'm sorry, anything?
Do you have a sense with Santa Barbara by chance as well?
I can't speak to Santa Barbara. I haven't seen any stats from their operations.
Okay, and the locations in the collection, how does their, just in thinking of kind of an equity look at it, how does the number of licensed facilities that serve after 10 compare with downtown? I guess just trying to get a sense of if we're trying to draw more people to downtown, but the collection has much more
life.
It has better conditions. It has an unfair advantage.
There's several things that are out of, if you're doing the balance examination, there are a number of things that are out of balance, so to speak. I want to say that there are 3 businesses right now that are actively operating, selling alcohol after 10 p.m. in the collection. One of the huge differences from a law enforcement standpoint is the collection has a security force in place that reduces the potential calls for service there. Their call for service level is significantly lower than downtown. In fact, that's kind of the proof of the pudding that model works where you have a significant security force. The advantage is that's one property owner, and the security force belongs to that property owner, the mall. Each one of those establishments that have entertainment inside, currently there's actually 1. They have their own security on staff, and I think that also reduces the potential for problems. And because of the newness of that facility, all those alcohol businesses are operating under an alcohol special use permit, whereas in downtown, that's not the case. We have a mixed bag.
But this would be operating under special use permit, correct?
That is the hope, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does the applicant have something to add? Is the applicant here?
Señora Ochoa, si tiene alguna pregunta o quiere añadirle algo a lo que se dijo aquí el día de hoy. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Sí. Ok. Buenas noches a todos. Les pido a todos ustedes que estoy haciendo yo mi preparando mi restaurante con mucho tiempo y con mucho amor.
I'm letting all
Y
you know that I'm
necesito-
preparing and getting ready to open this restaurant with a lot of love and desire.
Ajá, y necesito que me apoyen para abrir mi restaurante, que estoy haciéndolo con mucha emoción y entusiasmo. Y quiero cocinar para todos ustedes. Están cordialmente invitados a mi restaurante, que quiero
I
hacerlo
would like
con
to-
mucho amor.
Would like to
No, sorry.
would like to open up the restaurant with your support, and I would like to cook for all of you. I am doing this with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of energy to hopefully open soon.
Para mí es muy importante el tener el permiso del alcohol, pero no es para tanto para mí, sino que para mis clientes que voy a tener yo allí, para que se tomen una margarita o una cerveza, simplemente. El alcohol sí es importante, pero no tanto. Pero desgraciadamente los clientes piden una cerveza.
So I am seeking the license. It's not as important. It is important, but it's an added service for my clients. It's important just to have that benefit for them, but it's not that important for my business model.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The commissioners may have some questions for you. I have a question for you. Would you like to be able to serve alcohol on Friday and Saturday night until 12 a.m.?
Pregunta es que si usted quisiera servir alcohol después de las 11 de la noche, lo que viene siendo el viernes y sábado.
O no necesariamente, porque yo voy a hacer como eventos privados de cumpleaños, bautizos, bodas. No creo, pero
Not necessarily, because I'm going to be sponsoring and holding private events such as baptism, birthday parties, and family gatherings. So
Because, I'm sorry. That was it? Because what we're talking about up here, I think, is wanting to let you serve alcohol until 12 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights as part of your restaurant.
yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
So, la pregunta es el diálogo que se está tomando aquí, tratar de permitir y dar la habilidad de que se sirva alcohol después de las horas que se especifican.
Sí.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, the answer is yes. Commissioners, any questions of the applicant? No? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. I'm sorry. Any, are we ready to go into deliberations before we motion? Okay. Has anyone had any ex parte communication
No.
with anybody?
No.
No? All right. Okay. Commissioners? Commissioner Sanchez, you want to start?
I'm going to support this. Sounds like she has a very good business model. We certainly need more businesses in the downtown, especially where people can gather after dinner, for dinner, and those sort of things. I'm going to support it.
Thank you, Commissioner Chua. Vice Chair Chua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm willing to support this, but the thing that I have a concern is that we're basically penalizing certain business owner for the action of the other because maybe, I don't know, maybe because of lack of enforcement on our part. So, but if the applicant is happy with the hours as she stated per interpretation from Mr. Martinez, then, I'll be happy to support it.
Commissioner Sanchez.
Through the chair,
I'm sorry.
is there any individuals who wish to speak other than the applicant? We may want to,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, want to check.
I don't
that as
have
well.
any cards. I didn't ask. I had, okay. Is there anyone else here present who would like to comment on this agenda item? Oh, it looks like there is. I'm sorry, did you fill out a speaker card?
No, I didn't.
Okay, before you leave, if you're going to speak, please do so and give it to our commission clerk, okay?
Yes,
Thank
thank
you
you
very much.
for allowing me to speak. My name is Darlene Miller Gonzalez, and I had a business before and by the Burrito Express, and I know how much it is to invest in a business, and I really I thank you for supporting businesses in downtown. I'm an advocate for anything that has to do with businesses. I really, thank you guys for doing, more for our downtown, especially the businesses who are suffering so much. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm in the middle of public
sorry.
comment now.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this agenda item? I don't see anybody else. Are there any speaker cards or comment cards? There aren't any. So I will close the public comment on this item. Okay. Commissioner Sanchez.
Just a question to Mr. Martinez, Juan Martinez. Did I hear correctly? I'm not sure if the translation got through that if it's available that she would like to occasionally have some sort of extended hours to 12 a.m. Did I hear it correctly or incorrect?
No, that's already in here. She can have up to 6 special events for a permit as. Right. Yeah, that's what, would you ask her again?
Yeah, let's ask her again. Señora Silvia, la pregunta es de que si le ofrecen la habilidad de seguir y continuar las ventas de alcohol, si es algo que usted quisiera y tomaría en cuenta o está de acuerdo con la condición que se impone ahorita para restringir las ventas de alcohol para no más de las 10 de la noche.
Sí, estoy de acuerdo.
¿Está de acuerdo
Sí.
con las condiciones
Sí,
o
con las
estaría de...?
no con las condiciones que ellos me
Sí. Pero la pregunta que dijo el Commissioner Sánchez es que él quiere saber si usted acepta, si sería más favorable si la dejan y permiten vender y no restringir hasta medianoche. Si le permiten extender esas ventas de las 10 hasta las 12. O simplemente así como está bien, que sería simplemente hasta las 10.
Pues si me lo dejan a las 12 estaría perfecto.
So she has clarified that if she could sell till midnight, that it would be perfect.
Thank you. Okay. Further? Nothing? Anyone else have any comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez, for your presentation. Gracias, Señora Ochoa. There are a few of the concerns that I share with PD in regards to hours of operations, and hearing the comments from my fellow commissioners, it kind of goes against what we just talked about on the previous item in regards to planning for the future. We know that Oxnard is not perfect, and we know that certain things had happened in Oxnard that should never had happened, and that is now considered not the norm. I believe it's important to have a restaurant in downtown, better than, seeing an eye doctor on every corner in downtown. So a restaurant is something that I could really get behind. And I appreciate the clarification that Commissioner Sanchez asked in regards to the applicant, if she was wanting to extend her hours. It's just a little confusing because in the beginning she said that she was okay with 10 o'clock and that she has other things going on and that's why it's perfectly fine. And now she's saying that it's will be perfect till midnight. So I will support this item only because it is a benefit to downtown, it's a benefit to our community, and I look forward to one day attending this restaurant and eating the great food that apparently will have a lot to love and passion. So thank you.
Motion?
Okay. Would like to make a motion to accept the planning and zoning permit number 19-510-03, special use permit, a request to allow the sale of general alcohol and spirits for on-site consumption at this establishment.
With the hours that are in the resolution?
With the hours from 7 a.m. to 12 a.m.
On Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday.
I'll second.
And to confirm for the
wait.
record, I'm assuming on the other days it's from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., correct?
That's right.
Okay, just to clarify. Thank you.
Is that right for
Yes,
your motion?
correct. Yes.
So
Okay.
that's not the operation, the hours of operation plus serving of alcohol, correct?
Yes.
Okay, because I thought you only mentioned hours of operation between 7 to 12.
If staff could interject here very quickly, we don't regulate the hours of the restaurant itself.
Right.
Only the alcohol hours.
So serving of alcohol,
Serving of alcohol
not
is the only thing.
operating.
Correct.
Right.
Serving of alcohol is the only thing we're operating.
Right, exactly. That's why I want to clarify that. Thank you.
So the motion is to support the recommended action with the modification of the alcohol hours on Friday and Saturday to extend to 12 a.m.
Exactly.
I will second. We have a motion by Sanchez and a second by Frank. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes?
Chair Frank,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chua.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. We're now going to item G on our agenda. This is going to be a study session / report. It's an overview of the 2019 new housing laws and the regional housing needs assessment. We're pleased to have Kathleen Mallory, our Planning and Sustainability Manager, as well as Chris Williamson serving as a consultant on this reporting. Thank you very much. Perhaps we should take a 2-minute recess and get you set up and everything. And you'd like a... We're on the way to getting you there. Okay. Commissioners, do you want 2 minutes? Yes. Thank you. We'll take a short recess. We're waiting for Commissioner Chavez. Okay, we're all here now. Thank you.
Good. I just
Ms.
wanted to,
Mallory.
yes, good evening. Thank you for having, we're excited to be here and to present as a study session for the commission. What's happening with the state laws, the 2019 laws that came out actually just recently, and along with kind of where we're at with housing policies. So Chris Williamson and I have been really managing this program, and I wanted to have you hear from him. He's done a great job of analyzing some of the 2019 laws, and I'll turn it over to him, and then I'll go through with the regional housing needs assessment and how that's going to impact us going forward as part of our housing element update. So I'll close it out, but wanted to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. Before I start, I just want to generally say that in 2019, the state passed over 30 bills related to housing. One of these legal subscription services that people can get online grouped them into 6 categories. Most people have heard about tenant protections from being evicted. We're not talking about that specifically tonight. A second group was talking about, or bills address streamlining and increased density. We will talk about those. Accessory dwelling units, we're talking about those. Surplus land availability, we'll talk about those laws. CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, and housing, we'll touch on that briefly. And then there were some bills about funding, which we'll not talk about tonight, creating funding for housing. So I just wanted to set the stage that there were over 30 bills, and we're talking about half of them tonight that directly affects land use and zoning at the local level. So these are some of the first of this group of key housing bills. They're all effective January 1st, 2020. The Senate Bill 3030 is kind of the big one. Established the Housing Crisis Act of 2019 and added lots of language as to the reasons why housing affordability or lack of housing entirely is an issue of statewide concern. And by making that statement of statewide concern, that enables the state to supersede many local zoning and permitting codes and processes in the interest of a statewide concern. AB 1763, this is where we have a density, a bigger density bonus from the state. If you build an affordable housing project that's 100% affordable, which we have in our housing element called the AHOP program, then you will get an 80% density bonus for projects that have a minimum of 80% lower and 20% moderate income units. You get 4 development standards incentives, removes density entirely if the project is within half mile of a major transit stop. Now, removing density sounds onerous, but remember that there are still height limits and other types of development standards that sort of control the size of the building. In a way, we've already done that with the downtown code. AB 116 removes voter approval required for what are now called Enhanced Infrastructure Financing Districts, EIFDs, prior to issuing bonds to finance public improvements for housing development. This is a way to generate funding for what might have been like a redevelopment project at one time, and now essentially does not require voter approval. AB 1484 adds an exemption for any improvements on government-owned land used for affordable housing. So that's only for government-owned land. These 4 bills, AB 1255 requires reporting to the state an inventory of surplus lands in urbanized areas, and then further down essentially requires the state also to report surplus lands in AB 1486, and to report these surplus lands as part of your housing elements and your annual progress reports. SB 6 requires the state to create this inventory of local sites suitable for residential development along with surplus lands. And then 1483, excuse me, requires jurisdictions to publicly share information about ordinances, standards, fees, exactions, and so on, and even requires, which we already do, and then goes further and requires the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, to develop and update a 10-year statewide housing data strategy. So trying to get information to the right people about surplus lands and everything related to housing out to the public in a data strategy. Several more bills. AB 1743 expands the types of properties, affordable housing, that are exempt from community facility districts, or CFD taxes, and it expands the exemption to include properties that qualify for the property tax welfare exemption, and limits the ability of local agencies to reject housing projects because they qualify for this exemption. A bit of technicality there about affordable housing projects. Under certain circumstances, if they're owned by nonprofits, they don't pay certain taxes. They might pay in lieu fees. It's a taxing issue. SB 196 enacts a new welfare exemption from property tax for property owned by a community land trust, and makes other changes regarding tax assessments in CLTs. We don't have one in the city that really affects us, I don't think. And then SB 113, this is the one that is resulted last year or two ago in the lawsuit against the city of Huntington Beach. So the predecessor bill that authorizes the state attorney general to request that the court issue an order or judgment directing a jurisdiction with a non-compliant housing element to bring it into substantial compliance. So the state is putting teeth into these laws. Now, the following bills are specific to accessory dwelling units, and there are a fair number of changes to ADUs. Staff is right now preparing, excuse me, I'm sorry, preparing a new checklist, zoning code ordinance, which will clearly come to the Planning Commission later this year, to bring the city code into compliance with state standards. The state ADU laws are effective now, so we have I think about 20 applications waiting as soon as we pin down the details. So first of all, here are the two big ones are AB 68 and AB 881, and these changes now supersede whatever you have in your local code. You cannot use a standard like floor area ratio or minimum lot size to restrict ADUs. Oh, thank you. I told you I needed that drink. Yeah. No setback can be required for conversions or putting an ADU within an existing structure. No more than 4-foot setback required on side and rear yards for other types of ADUs. That's coming down from 5 feet. So that's like a reduction from 5 to 4. The code cannot require replacement of parking in garages and carports. We did that on our first round, and that went away about 2 years ago, so that reinforces that requirement. Now this is a new one, requires ministerial approval within 60 days instead of 90 days for a permit that is deemed complete application. So that's further speeding up the permitting process. That's a building permit within 60 days. Removes requirement for owner occupancy for 5 years. So I don't know the logic behind this with the state, but the requirement that one of the residents be the owner of the property is now not enforceable, and that's a change, but it's only for 5 years. See how it goes, yeah. Here's some more. Requires that a minimum efficiency unit size, which is 220 square feet, we already have that, and it gets convoluted here. I've been suffering. Sets a minimum maximum of 850 square feet for a studio ADU and 1,000 square feet if there's more than 2 or more bedrooms. So it's setting some size parameters. The maximum size is still 1,200 square feet, which the city has. So that did not change. No parking required for an ADU within half mile of a bus stop. Within a historic district, part of an existing residence or a converted accessory structure or within 1 block of a car share facility. So if you draw a half mile around the bus stops in the city, it's almost the entire city, except perhaps for the west along the beach, where the bus service may not be there. So this is almost removing parking requirements for ADUs. No fire sprinklers required for an ADU unless required in a primary residence. That's the same. Here's another new one. A jurisdiction may not require corrections of non-conforming zoning conditions on ADUs built before 2020 as a condition of approval, kind of a technical thing. Again, that's also for 5 years. Now, another big change is that each single-family property primary unit allows an ADU and or a junior ADU on the same lot, and it also allows ADUs within multifamily properties. So a junior ADU is a new use. It's meant to be like the converting a single room. Imagine the idea would be you have a bedroom in the rear of the house. You add an outside door for it. It does not even have to have its own restroom. You would still use the bathroom in the rest of the house. It does have to have its own little kitchen area, and that is called a junior ADU. So the properties now can have the primary unit, an attached dwelling unit that we're used to now, and this addition of a junior ADU. The junior ADU was defined earlier, but it was optional. Now, basically, it's allowed by state law. Also, the bill goes on to reduce some other regulatory barriers to ADU approval and construction. Moving on to AB 587, this is an exemption where for qualified affordable housing organizations that they could actually apparently approve a parcel map to create a single property of 1 ADU from the primary unit, a 2-unit condominium or something like that, and sell that to the eligible low-income resident. But it's only for nonprofits. SB 13 gets into fee structures where the city creates a tiered fee impact structure which charges ADUs based on size and location, shortens the application approval, creating an avenue for ADUs to comply with codes, and enhances state enforcement of ADU statutes. AB 671, and this really rolls over into what Kathleen will talk about shortly as part of the next housing element, which we're starting soon, essentially now, with the regional housing needs assessment. The next housing element period is 2021 to 2029, and that housing element will require that jurisdictions encourage affordable ADU rentals and so forth, and basically carry on the state's intent through your housing element. Oh, so this is should I stop here, Kathleen?
Sure, I'll go ahead and jump in, and you can either hand me the remote, or we can tag team it with the remote, whatever you'd like, Chris. So we're currently in our 5th regional housing needs assessment process or timeframe. We refer to it as RENA. Every year the state requires that we provide the California State Department of Housing and Community Development with an annual report. It's due by April. So we are in the process now of completing the 2019 annual report. And this just provides a quick update of kind of where we're at for our current cycle, our 5th cycle. As Chris mentioned, we're starting the 6th cycle, and I have some slides for that. So this does a good job of showing that in the 5th RENA cycle, our housing allocation number, which is comprised of 5 different income categories, as you see income groups there, our allocation that we were required to build or shoot for building during that 8-year cycle was 7,301 units. And we've done a very good job of meeting that under that total progress column. That's a rolled up number of those columns you see. But in our progress, we've constructed close to or thereabouts 5,244 units. leaving us with a remaining RENA of 2,057. That's admirable. It's, we've done a great job of building in those various income group categories. And one thing we didn't include was some of the ADU units. When we had the accessory dwelling units, when we had the housing element certified, we didn't know what the future held with ADUs. And as we go forward, we're really meeting some of our affordable housing units, our allocation numbers with those ADU units. So you can see on column F, through that AHOP program, the All Affordable Housing Opportunity Program, we have remaining land available to meet the remaining capacity. And the final on the far right column, you can see totals when we look at capacity in column F, we're actually over capacity with a number of available units that could be built in those 5 income category groups of roughly 616 units. So that's telling the story of how we've been doing, and we should be proud as a city, I believe. And obviously, you can always do more. We've done a good job of constructing income group housing units in a variety of income groups. So next slide, thank you. As Chris mentioned, we have been deep in this since 2018. We started working with the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG, to help determine what the regional housing need assessment numbers should be for Ventura, for the city of Oxnard, and all the various cities and counties that are made up of in the SCAG region, which is 192 jurisdictions around 6 counties. We all started working, giving input for that 2001-2029 RENA number. And with that, we worked with SCAG to look at transportation capacity through something called the RTP, and also look at how our growth was going to meet with the sustainable community strategy. The state really started to put together an approach that looks at housing relative to all environmental factors, greenhouse gas, vehicle miles traveled, all those components that really make sense to look at where you put housing relative to the ways you impact the environment in your community. So we started giving input, and then back in 2018, and then we actually, through something called local input process, we provided in 2018 updates to our population projections, our employment, our housing projections, and we gave it over that SCAG period, which is 2045, from 2020 incrementally up to 2045. I think I mentioned earlier, every 8 years, the city is subject to our housing element update, and that's again with those various income categories that I showed you on the prior slide. This, I think, does a great job. We presented this to council and committee as well, which is, what is the face of affordable housing? This is the face. It's your postal worker. It's even your entry-level planning professional. It's your admin staff, grocery workers, crossing guards. This just, to me, really resonates and really shows what it looks like to be a worker with a certain wage, be a 2-income family or a 1-income family. And you can see, right now, to be considered a lower-income person, you have an annual income. Let's say I've got 3 people in my household. I make less than $75,350 per year. With a 30-person household. So this is a table that I think is really important to remember. And then look at wages for your teachers. An entry teacher salary right now is $45,000. That's for what I know, in Conejo Unified School District. That's for one person. That person would very clearly fit between the very low and lower income category for just one person. Great, thank you. So this, as we went through the 2019 working with SCAG, we gave them our housing projections, and SCAG came back and said, all right, we're going to look at housing from a standpoint of both current need and then projected or future need. So you're going to see a lot of this conversation of current or existing need and then projected or future need. So in the past, housing and your RENA numbers have all been focused on projected need. What is the future 8-year need for housing? This time, to really look at addressing the housing crisis that we all know exists and that the governor has made a point about so many times. The HCD came back and said, we're going to rectify, I'm using that word, they didn't use that, what the existing or current need problem is. We know there's a deficiency in housing. We hear there's a housing crisis. We all hear it. So we're going to assign a certain number of housing units to make up for that current deficiency. And that means that's housing units where there's too many people crammed into a unit because there's too much cost burden. You know, the housing prices is too much, housing rent is too much. There's people that are crowding into housing because they can't afford it. There's units that were replaced or demolished during the fire, and then there's a vacancy rate where we know that the vacancy rate actually should be greater than it is, but there's so many people vying for housing, the vacancy rate actually is lower. So they came up with this formula considering those factors that I just identified, and they identified a housing unit number to make up for current need. And I'll show you that number in the next coming slides. And then they came forward, they meaning HCD driving down to SCAG, our region. They came up with a projected household growth, adding the vacancies and replacements, and came up with another number. And those numbers were allocated by different counties, the 6 counties I showed you earlier. So next slide. So for going forward for this 6th cycle, our RENA and all of SCAG's RENA is made up of something called current and future need. And in addition, SCAG said, all right, we're going to also allocate housing unit numbers to communities that have something called a high quality transit area. And those are areas that have a Metrolink station, one, and that have bus transit or some form of transit where there's 15-minute headways, meaning your bus moves and picks up along a designated line every 15 minutes. So the SCAG said we're going to allocate, going back to the sustainable community strategy I mentioned, where you look at housing near transit, you look at ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you look at ways to limit your vehicle miles traveled. In SCAG's wisdom, I'm going to use that wisdom, they said we're going to put units not near those corridors or those areas. And as it turns out, we have a corridor up Oxnard Boulevard. So we received a very large number because of that corridor allocation, which was brand new. We'd never seen reference to corridors. We've always seen reference to areas. And none of our areas have met that headway standard. So we were surprised, and we wound up seeing that we had this allocation number through corridor. Yes.
Are you open to some interruption?
It would be great if I could go through, if I could.
Okay.
That would be helpful. This is fairly complex, and I'm getting into a little more complexities next. The other new thing that SCAG did was do something called a social equity adjustment. And basically, it was a formula that where if you didn't build affordable housing in the past, remember the annual report I showed you? Well, we could prove we had been. If you hadn't been building affordable housing, and principally in those very low income and extremely low income categories, the formula, I don't want to say penalized because that's a judgmental word, but it basically allocated more units to those jurisdictions in the extremely low, and very low income categories because they hadn't been building their units, which really makes sense, right? So that was a brand new factor, and there was a percentage range between 150 and 180%. So there we go. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. Great. All right, so here, this is the interesting thing, right? So in October of 2019, SCAG came at the HCD allocated down to SCAG a total regional housing needs number of 1,344,827 units to be constructed between 192 cities and 6 counties over that 8-year period. Of that existing need or that current need, they allocated, you got to make up for that problem, and we're going to tell those cities and those counties, over that 8-year window, you have to build 836,857 units in all of those income category ranges I mentioned, and you're going to have to address the projected need of housing over that 8-year window of 504,973 units. And you can see those percentages. That was over 3 times what every single city planned for. In fact, it blew up their Excel spreadsheet, and none of us could get in. We all got the notice. It was phenomenal. As a result, there was a number of meetings, and the number has determined by HCD it is staying. That is a solid number, 1,344,740. The big concern is that if you're looking at projected or the future need, basically that was all the cities in the SCAG region. That was a projected need number to the year 2045, and it has been ratcheted down to 2029. So it's crammed in down to that time frame as the idea of you're going to have to accommodate it during that time frame. It allocated the current need by policy choices, not by actual data. You know, it took that projected, remember projected and current need are the same, and it establishes those unit counts, and it has to be accommodated to that time frame. Although most cities are just wondering why is that the case? We don't have the capacity, and that's not a planned 2029 number for us. Our social equity adjustment went up to the very highest. It was 180% to reflect that we had been building our affordable housing. And I mentioned it added units up that high-quality transit corridor, which we have. So for Ventura County, of that top number, we received for Ventura County an 8-year arena housing number of 26,214 total units, of which we have 8,484 units to be accommodated in Oxnard. Now, if we go to the next slide, this breaks it out. I love this slide because it really does show you. Again, this is just the sixth cycle where we're going to be having to build. The table speaks for itself. Under the existing need, that number that was allocated to Ventura County, we got a big number of that. We got 62.3% of that number for existing need. And again, that has a lot to do with that corridor that I mentioned to you, high quality transit corridor. We did see a number of cities, some large cities that we are comparable to, get more very low income allocations. Ventura went up significantly than from what it was. So this is where the numbers basically are landing at this point. As a comparison, our fifth cycle allocation, RENA allocation was 7,301. Go to the next, thank you. So just to give you an update where we're at with this, we are tracking it very, very closely. We are expecting this final RENA methodology to be approved by HCD or returned to SCAG for changes and then approved, but it's highly unlikely that methodology will be changed, that HCD will change it, and that's the complex methodologies of social equity adjustment, high quality transit area corridors, some of the allocation methodologies. It's very unlikely that will change, and the number is it won't change. The 1,344,741 number. The appeal process does begin sometime in February, and it goes through 2020, July 2021. New thing this cycle is that a jurisdiction can appeal another jurisdiction's number if you don't believe it's fair. Right now, we are evaluating, and we are looking at the numbers and determining what our next step is. And so we're not saying that we're proceeding with any appeal at this point. We're evaluating. We'll see what the final data shows come January, February. We'll then get the final RENA allocation in October, and then we'll have to complete our housing element by October 21. And that is to HCD for their review and approval. We have started our housing element update contract process. We've got PlaceWorks on board. They morphed from Michael Baker. You may remember they have updated our housing element last 2 cycles. They are very involved with HCD, and they moved over to PlaceWorks. So we have hired them, and we'll be working very closely with them for the update to our housing element. And next slide, Chris, I think that might be it. So we are both available to answer any questions. Really complex, and we tried to kind of distill it down.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. I thought you simplified it really well, and it was very cohesive. So fortunately, I have the advantage of having access to all those legal updates come through my listservs, you know, as a lawyer. So I had a little head start, but which made me appreciate your presentation even more because it is complicated. Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions, comments?
Chair
concerns?
Frank, if I may, I just want to point out the numbers on this chart are a little different than the total there. It's just the spreadsheet, the SCAG spreadsheet changes slightly over a couple months, and this is the correct chart.
Okay, not too much variance.
Yeah, no.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Sanchez, anything? No? Vice Chair Chua? No. Nothing? Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you for the presentation. It was very readily digestible, which is hard to do. I'm curious about how they come to some of the allocations by city. Like I look, for example, at Ojai, which I assume includes the entire valley. Would that be correct? Or is it just the city?
It would just be the city. And Oakview, if it's in the county, it would be a part of the county.
Unincorporated?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I see. And okay. So when they parse out these numbers, what's the process by which that decision gets done? And do the cities have input into, well, you know, Oxnard can handle a third of the total for the county, but, you know, these areas can only handle 0.1% or 0.2%, or, you know, we really like our community to be very affluent, and so we don't want very much of this. I mean, I'm curious about how it came to these numbers.
Sure, I'll start up, and certainly, Chris, if you want to add anything. The first is, as I mentioned, we started working with SCAG back in 2018. So the first piece is that it takes into consideration availability to grow and what your general plan says. And then it also takes into consideration this front-end work or preliminary work. It takes into consideration regional transportation planning components and transit data, or as we call it, traffic area zones, to be terribly nerdy, TAZs. So it takes into consideration those pieces, and then we report back to SCAG on, you know, what our capacity is. We also take into consideration general plan numbers, as I think I mentioned that. Then with that, a number is allocated, and the cities were, to all the different cities were involved in the process to look at the different options. There was so many ways to slice this and so many different options for how to allocate it. The final decision is the fourth arena methodology, and the cities were all very involved and engaged in that discussion about how that should be laid out.
In your response, Professor, perhaps you could, for the benefit of history, explain how the Jones Ranch fiasco impacted our numbers. Okay, because I'm sure they have no idea what I'm even talking about.
Okay, Chair Frank, you asked.
Well, only because
yes.
This scenario is what created the very large numbers required by Oxnard. The city of Oxnard appealed the decision by SCAG, who created the number requirement for us, and the city of Oxnard lost. So those numbers are still in our requirement. So please tell the story.
Yes. In a larger context, maybe I'll sort of add to what Kathleen said about how a regional planning agency does things somewhat differently. First, to your comment or question or reminder, so the current housing element is for the period 2013 to 2021. The one before that was 2006 to 2012, I think. And we didn't submit our housing element on time because in 2006 we were updating our general plan from 2020 to 2030. And we were in the middle of that process, making changes and so forth, so it didn't make sense to push your housing element out in front of your general plan. The general plan process, which I was working on, really got underway in 2005 and 6 and 7 and 8. We were issuing environmental impact reports, and everyone was focused on Ormond Beach and all sorts of big topics. Around 2007 or 8, out on Vineyard Avenue, past the Juvenile Justice Center, which is on the left, past River Park, and then you have Strickland Acres, right?
Yeah, Vineyard and Rose.
And then you're
118.
right past that is a property, a ranch, a strawberry ranch, owned by, I think, Mr. Jones was the name. And it was a large tract of land. And he, and I suppose whoever, approached the city and said, we will build 2,500 units of affordable housing if you let us come into the city and annex into the city. And so all 2,500 units would be affordable. Initially,
Took it out of SOAR.
And initially this was a way to avoid a public vote because they're all affordable. Well, this bounced around, as you can imagine, with attorneys and with LAFCO, the Formation Commission, and the Public Works Department was looking at how would we get our sewer service out there and water and all the kind of what it all meant. And that was added into our general plan at the time as an option. And 2,500 extra units was a pretty big chunk of additional growth. So at the time, SCAG was going through this similar process, and they said, what is your, what we call, what does your general plan show for your city? We're going to use that number in our planning process. And that makes sense. And our published general plan included that 2,500 units. So we gave them that number. We kind of had to. And they put it in our numbers, and our numbers went from like 4,000 to 7,000 units of additional growth that we were planning for. And at the time, well, there was controversy here. Eventually, when the general plan got to the city council in 2010, 2009, 10, 11, was adopted finally in November of 2011, the entire Jones Ranch idea was removed and was completely dropped out of the general plan, and of course our totals dropped considerably. So we appealed our arena number at that time and said, look, hey, our general plan changed. This giant chunk of property is not coming into the city. You should take it out of our number. And to our dismay, SCAG basically said, no, that was the number you gave us as of when we asked, and we're not going to change it. And they didn't, and we were stuck with that high arena number back then. Let me share with you briefly this time, because that was contentious, as you can imagine. SCAG has to try to juggle 192 city councils and county supervisors. They've been sued several times by cities over this very process, and they may yet again. So they want to not have problems. So in the cycle I just talked about, 06 to 13, I think the city of Irvine sued them, and they had to spend several $100,000 on attorneys, and it went around and around, and they wanted to avoid that. Along comes the recession in 08, right? Nobody's building anything anyway. So the next housing element was in the recession, and the SCAG basically said, well, we know no one's really, the market's not there. Tell us a number you want, and we'll put your number in, and then you won't be upset by it. And that's the housing element we have right now, the fifth cycle. So again, the city, we put in an honest number of 7,000 units. That's how many units we had coming in River Park, Wagon Wheel. You know, they're all well-known projects. As a contrast, and I don't mean to disparage, but the other, Port Hueneme put in 2. Thousand Oaks put in 192. And so there was this huge disparity between some cities that put in a very low number. They had virtually no obligation to build affordable housing for 8 years. And then other cities that I would like to think did an honest number. You know, we have our number now of 7,300. So that cycle generated, and how they did it generated a lot of negative feedback and anger, including from this city council and others, expressed in letters and so forth. So then you get to this current cycle. Now the state legislature, during a housing boom and an affordability crisis, which they've declared with SB 330, says this time around they pass a new set of laws regarding the housing element. Am I taking too long?
No.
I'm not boring you. I'll try not to. I could go for an hour. No, I won't. But this time the state legislature says, well, we have this tremendous housing crisis. It's affecting economic development and all sorts of things. We're going to add to this process that you must add units to get people out of crowded units, okay, which makes some sense. And additionally, if a lot of people are overpaying, you know, more than 40% of their income for their housing, the theory is if you increase the supply, prices will come down, vacancy rates will go up, more units are available. So in a sense, this current need is to build empty units for the existing people. Think about that. Build 800,000 empty units all over the 6 counties so that the current population can just kind of spread out, pay less, and be less crowded. That's the theory. Then on top of that, you have natural population increase, although it's slowing down quite a bit, and you have immigration into the area from throughout the United States and the world. That's called projected future need. And you just need another 500,000 units to take care of additional people where the population does go up. So that's a change, a huge change. No one was even remotely thinking that the existing need number would be like 900,000 units, where the future, where it usually was a number between 400,000 and 500,000 for everything. And then we get 1.3 million. So this just shocked everyone back in October. One more topic and then I'll stop. So how did SCAG go about this time, in a sense? So the state legislature is doing what it's doing. And down here, 2 years ago, SCAG, trying to do the right thing, wrote out to every city and said, send us your population, employment, and household projections based on your general plan or whatever you want to send us for the years 2020, 2030, 2035, 40, and 45. Why 2045? Because that's the regional transportation plan. So we've got 2 plans going on at the same time. The RTP is required by federal law to get federal transportation money to build freeways, metro lines, the whole bit. You got to plan out 25 years. And then in the first 10 years, you've got the housing cycle. Okay, so they overlap for 10 years to up to 2029. And then you have 2045 is for the transportation. That's why they asked for our numbers to the year 2045. Our general plan ends right now at 2030. So we extended modestly our POP projections from 2030 to 45 and gave that to SCAG. Everyone did that, all the cities and counties. And that became part of the basis for what SCAG is calling a local input. And it is, it's local input to SCAG. Then along comes the big number, and they look and they go, wow, the cities and counties in our 6 counties only have planned capacity for about 400,000 units by 2029, and HCD, the state, is telling us we need 1.3 million. How do we get the 1.3 million? So they said, well, we're going to take all your planned growth all the way to 2045 and compress it down as if it's all going to happen by 2030, 2029. And that gets us part of the way there. Even that doesn't get all of it. And then they said that what was left over, several 100,000 units. How are we going to spread those units out over 192 jurisdictions? And what they decided was they'd say, well, 50% of that number will be based on your proportion of all the population in the entire region. Okay, and roughly Oxnard has about 2% of the, 1% of the entire population. Southern California is almost 20 million people and we're 200,000, so that's 1%. So 1% of that number they couldn't put anywhere comes based on your proportion of the overall population. That kind of makes sense. The other 50% is going to these areas with high transit access. It's policy driven. We want to put housing next to transit. Metrolink stations, existing and likely transit areas, and what either a transit area or a transit corridor, which is a series of linked areas. And these are all over Southern California. When you go to LA, of course, you're thinking Vermont Avenue and Santa Monica Boulevard. Those are all transit corridors. Wilshire, that makes sense, right? Out here, where we have distinct cities, we don't have long corridors. However, we got one now. SCAG, using Gold Coast Transit data on where the bus lines are running with Gold Coast Transit and how often the headways are, 15 minutes or nearly 15 minutes, they designated the entire area from Saviors and Hueneme Road at the south end of the city, all the way up Oxnard Boulevard, across the freeway bridge, all the way through Ventura City and out the avenue. So this is now a long corridor, and that's why up there on the screen, under the second from the right column, we have 5,000 units of existing need, and Ventura City has 3,500. A lot of those got assigned to us because we have a corridor, not because we have necessarily a lot of people here who need empty units. It's a policy-driven decision. And so from this screen, you can see that in the yellow Oxnard third column from the right, we have 35% of the RENA for the entire county, and we have 25% of the population. And we have 62% of the need, we have 25% of the population. So that's how SCAG did the planning. And, to them it makes sense. To some of us, it's sausage making, and it's driven by state law. SCAG really has no choice, neither does HCD. They have to implement state law, even though 192 cities are kind of crying about it down here at the moment.
Thank you, thank you,
Okay.
thank you, thank
That's
you.
enough.
Okay, any other input, commissioners? Commissioner Chavez?
Thank you, Ms. Mallory, and thank you, Dr. Williamson, for the presentation. A lot of information, but it was very to the point. In regards to slides 6 and 7, AB 68 and AB 881, I know you made mention in regards to a junior ADU that could potentially be maybe a back bedroom that has outdoor access, doesn't need a bathroom, but needs, I'm assuming, a kitchenette or what, right? Would that also apply to like garage structures?
Good question, Chair and Commissioner Chavez. The idea behind the junior, the definition of junior ADU that in the state law says something like converted bedroom. You go into these motel rooms where you have a little sink and maybe a microwave and one of those like student dormitory half refrigerators. That's the idea. If you don't have direct outside access, the junior ADU requires one. So it allows for a small addition to have sort of a doorway, for example, and a closet, something where you could come in from the outside. It does not require a separate bathroom. You could still share the bathroom with the primary residence, and that would be a junior ADU. Some cities have already authorized those. We looked at it and just said not yet, but maybe, and now it's the state law. So essentially on every parcel, legal parcel with a existing single-family residence under the state law, almost without question, you can put in an accessory dwelling unit as either a new structure in the back, a converted garage, an addition, some combination of an addition, conversion, and you can have a junior ADU. So to get to your question, if the junior ADU was incorporated in a conversion of a garage area, I think the city would consider that a junior ADU.
And no requirement for owner occupied.
And no requirement.
So you're basically allowing a rooming house.
You're basically allowing a triplex.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah.
Right.
Although there's a size limit on the junior, no more than 500 square feet, presumably smaller. The idea is it's for one person or two. No additional parking.
Which, you know, ends up limiting a lot of projects when you bring in that element. On slide number 13, when it starts talking about the high-quality transit areas and corridors, now this confused me just because of the fact that, yes, we do have a Metrolink station at the Oxnard Transportation Center. Unfortunately, the service is not reliable. It is very broken. You may get 2 trips in the morning, then 1 trip in the afternoon, and then maybe 3 trips in the evening time. Bus transit, the shortest headway time that Gold Coast Transit offers is between the Route 1 that goes from the Oxnard Transportation Center into Port Hueneme and Route 6 that goes from Oxnard Transportation Center into the Avenue of Ventura is a 20-minute headway. So when you made the comment that the transit corridor goes from Saviors and Hueneme all the way to the Avenue, it looks like they just followed the bus line all the way from one end to the other, yes, which is a little funny because that's what the bus line used to be before they decided to split it up.
If I can add it, it's the projected plan. It's the corridor. It's the corridor and the plan for how that corridor route, as described, Saviors through the Avenue, how that will achieve that 15-minute headway in 8 years. So based upon conversations with Gold Coast Transit, they're projecting that in 8 years there will be that 15-minute headway.
Right.
Now, how is a corridor determined? Because when I think of the corridors, I think only in one city. You know, you mentioned Santa Monica, you mentioned Wilshire, but you're talking about ultimately 2 areas that don't really jive too well together?
Well, right now, right now that line 6 doesn't meet that headway. And right now, correct, our Metrolink doesn't meet that 15-minute headway. In other communities, they have transit Metrolink stations that have that robust headway timeframes. And they have future plans for transit that will meet that headway timeframe. So we don't have it now, but Gold Coast provided projections to SCAG saying we do envision being able to have that 15-minute headway in 8 years on that line 6.
Now, if they don't meet that 15-minute headways for whatever reasons, we are a county that doesn't really receive a lot of transportation funds. What then happens? Is that still considered a corridor after that?
As part of this RENA process, yes, it's considered a corridor, and yes, the units are allocated in that for that corridor area. I will say that it was like a light bulb when we figured out where this came from. I was happy the day we figured it out, because we couldn't figure it out at all. And we've had very good conversations with Gold Coast, and they have new leadership over there in terms of exactly dealing with that issue, which is many of the grants are driven, these affordable housing, sustainable communities grants, are based upon these 15-minute headways. And so they're area driven. I've not seen any of these AHSC grants that have been corridor driven. So we have made a pact, and we will, with Gold Coast Transit, and one of the comment letters we're going to be submitting down to SCAG as part of a master plan that they're asking us to look at is exactly that, which is we are pointing this out. We don't have the headways now. We want to be receiving formula money. That means you meet certain criteria, you get the money, not that you have to have such a competition with other cities to get the money. So I think just the pure fact that we now realize how this number is allocated by that corridor, and we have good conversations with Gold Coast, along with letters that we're submitting to SCAG and HCD that are policy-based letters. We'll continue to push for money just to specifically address this deficiency in this issue.
Does VCTC play a role in
They have,
that
yeah, and
transportation?
they've been players at the table as well, and they've been involved in these discussions.
Okay. Yeah, because, because I work in LA and I see, we have buses that range from 10 minutes all the way up to 60-minute headway times, and we have all this development, and we have a lot of Metrolink stations. Where else would there be a future Metrolink station anywhere in Ventura County?
That it's not right now. There's no other plan for Metrolink. This is what you have now. Ventura County is what is there. I mean, there are other stops that are planned over in the Inland Empire areas, and there's other areas where there are future Metrolink plans, and
So-
green lines and gold lines, other metro lines.
So we're focusing more on bus transit versus rail transit.
That's correct.
Okay. I like one of the comments that Dr. Williamson said in regards to trying to build the housing to handle the population that we have now. I know back in 2015, I kept saying that we need to really, address this because of the fact that working with the school district, I saw multiple families living in an apartment or a single-family home. But we also understand that this number is always going to grow. It's not going to remain that. So does this mean that every cycle we have to, keep up with, keep up with the Jones in this sense?
No, the housing element is an 8-year cycle part, supplement of the general plan, okay?
And this is the first time we've had the reference to an existing need and capacity to address that deficiency. So, I mean,
Right.
This is the first time we've seen this number and this methodology, more importantly.
Okay, so, and the only reason why I make that is because if any resident sees the chart that lists all the cities in the county, their first reaction is going to be, what the heck, why is Oxnard getting dumped on like this? Yes, we're the largest city, but a lot of residents believe that we're already overpopulated. They make a lot of reference to the traffic conditions in our city because there are some areas of our city at certain times that do have the issues. So what do we tell them when they see this chart and they see, well, why is it, because it's Oxnard, Thousand Oaks, and Ventura that's considered the metropolitan of Ventura County, right?
Generally.
Generally. So when they see this chart and they see Thousand Oaks for very low income is only 722 versus Ventura and Oxnard, which has over 1,000 very low income housing, what do we tell those residents?
Exactly what Dr. Williamson explained in his hour-long presentation on the housing element and the general plan. He just explained it to you.
I understand that, but that wasn't the question. The question was, how do we explain to the resident? Because they're not, sorry, Dr. Williamson.
No.
I appreciate your presentation, but residents are not going to watch this video and be like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Well-
They're only, excuse me, they only are going to look at this chart and see, why is Oxnard being dumped on?
And maybe they could then inquire, we're here to receive this report.
Well, thank you for that, but still, that's not what I'm asking.
If I may attempt to.
Chris,
Attempt.
why don't
Please
you do
attempt.
three points, which is the population, give 3 points that would be to be able to answer
Sure.
when the question comes. It's because of this, it's a population's larger, it's because of the percentages, the 50% of existing need. Just give the 3.
I think I can sum it up maybe in just one.
Okay.
And that is that, well, two actually. One is that the Oxnard is a younger city with generally a growing population internally from children, whereas Thousand Oaks and others are more older generally. So there's that. Secondly, now I have three. Secondly, we're one of the few cities that still has significant economic development opportunities. For example, the Sakioka Farms, 400 acres of land out there that will yet be developed with 15,000 jobs. So we're going to continue to grow in that sense of being a job center. The Navy is still adding facilities, and Cal State's still going to grow by another 10,000 students. So we're in the middle of a growth area. And then thirdly, we are the city due largely, unfortunately, to some of with a higher proportion of people who don't make a lot of money. So the need is here. Thousand Oaks doesn't have a large low-income population to start with, so they don't need a lot of units to help them. We do. We have about 40% of our population very low income, and so the need is here for those additional units available to very low and low income.
And if you look at the population, the size of Thousand Oaks or Ventura compared to Oxnard, we are the largest city in Ventura County as well. And then the more technical, the fifth piece that we could just say, there's the formula for existing need considered corridors, it considered population. Those are really I think the 5 takeaways.
And I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I don't see anybody else. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. All right. Planning, item H on our agenda, Planning
Point in
Commission.
order. We do have members of the public. I don't know if we want to offer them the opportunity to be able to respond.
This is a study session. Item H, Planning Commission business.
Madam Chair.
Please, Vice Chair Chua.
I would like to request that on the next agenda, we add an agenda for a selection of a vice chair.
Council?
My interpretation would be that Vice Chair Chua is seeking a motion for reconsideration. That can occur, but there would need to be a majority of the Planning Commission here this evening voting to reconsider the election for the Vice Chair. So that I would take Vice Chair Chua's motion. That's a motion, but he would need a second. Then there need to be 3 votes total for that to occur. Then if that occurred, then it would go be placed on the next available agenda.
Okay.
So I would like to make that motion.
Okay, I'll second. Only to make him happy.
I'm always happy.
No, you know what I mean.
So there's a motion and a second. I guess we go with discussion if there's a desire for discussion, or we can go right to the vote.
Do you want discussion? Oh, Commissioner Meyer.
I guess my only concern is that Vice Chair can become Chair, of course, as
Anyone
needed.
can become Chair.
Anyone could become, but
yeah.
I mean, like, you fill in, and my concern is that you have a good depth of knowledge and experience in filling that role, and I'm just concerned about if you leave that role, then who's going to fill those shoes, and who's comfortable with filling those shoes? So,
well, I'm sure that we have. I'm basing this decision on what transpired last week.
Yeah.
I think that what happened last week is an indication of the rest of the commissioners wanting to go with the usual flow where, everybody progresses. But, so with that, I would like the commission to have a solid, support for a particular chair, or vice chair. So, if that be it. I mean, anybody that becomes a vice chair always have their, their stumbling block, but they'll do fine. I'm sure.
And this is just, if you want to have that discussion as to who it should be, perhaps at the agendized item.
Yes, under the Brown Act, we can really just consider whether or not
Putting it on
there's
the
going to be a
agenda.
motion for reconsideration. So I would recommend with that limited discussion that there be a vote, and if 3 of the planning commissioners vote for that, then it would be agendized at an upcoming meeting.
Correct.
Then we could, yeah.
Okay, let's do that, and then I want to ask another question. Okay. Can we have a roll call?
Vice Chair Chua,
Yes.
Chair Frank,
Yes.
Chavez,
No.
Meyer,
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Have our new commissioners been tutored on Brown Act?
They have not. I believe that's coming up at an upcoming meeting. I'm sorry, Mr. Kolwitz,
We've been looking at the Brown Act as being a possible training in February, coordinating with the city attorney's office.
Okay.
Brown Act and conflict of interest, both of those items.
Okay, so that'll be an introduction for them and a refresher for the rest of us, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's for the whole, everybody.
That's
Okay,
correct.
I think that's an outstanding idea. Okay. Any other planning commission business? I don't see anything. We'll stand adjourned. Oh, do you want to make any comment?
The only
No.
comment is the next planning commission meeting is on February 6th.
Mhm.
We're looking at 2 items on that particular date currently. One would be the Public Works Capital Improvement Program and the Planning Commission going through your general plan consistency findings. We're trying to get you that book as soon as possible. Public Works is still working on that one. And the second item is the Wagon Wheel Master Alcohol Use Permit.
Right.
So those
Sorry, I
are
was
your
telling you.
items coming up.
Master
Alcohol Use
alcohol.
Permit.
Yeah, so that the restaurants aren't coming in each time for an alcohol permit. It's going to be administrative. No, I don't think. Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you.